Okay, there you go.
Hey, dude. Yo, I was on. Okay, so Tuesday, I was out of town. Not out of town, but I was in the town driving around. I was doing some errands, and learning some important life lessons here and there. But one thing I found out from all my wonderful viewing members on Discord was you were with Oliver Stone and a couple other people as well in Washington, D.C., talking
Yeah.
about the JFK files. First of all, buddy, I got to ask, what happened? How did this happen? When did this thing drop? Did Oliver Stone say, hey, come on down? Start from the beginning. How did this happen? And of course, I want to talk about just that entire hearing because there's two people who really stood out as being either dumb or dumber, but we'll talk about
Oh
that later.
God.
Start from the beginning.
Well, I mean, people should remember I have ties to Oliver Stone. I've interviewed him twice.
Fantastic.
The first time was, I can't remember. I think it was like November of 2023. That's right. And then the second time was sometime around January of 2024, just before I had launched my campaign. And actually, that interview still gets cited to this day because of what he said about Netanyahu. And so then I guess I'll give you a Hardlands exclusive. I found out about the hearings like the day before that he was going to be testifying, and I was like, okay, I'll just day trip. I mean, Washington D.C. from New York is only 3.5 to 4 hour drive, depending how fast you're going and if you stop to eat or use the bathroom and stuff. And I left early in the morning because I didn't know what time it was going to start, and then later I found out it was going to be 2 o'clock. So actually, I decided to make a day of it. For example, that I had Dr. Mark Perlmutter. He did an interview with me as he got back from Gaza. And, for people who don't know, he's a doctor who was in Gaza. So I decided to kind of make a sort of day around it. I was there early in the Congress, and this is something people should just kind of do. If you just have time in Washington, D.C., Congress is in session. So before I went to the hearing, I went to the House side and I went to the congressmen, all of them. And I was, well, not all of them, but like the ones that I thought like maybe you'll bring this guy to testify. Like, for example, I went to Al Green's office because he recently got kicked out of the Trump address to the Congress. I think you saw this, right, where he like stood up and intervened and he was like, you're not God or something like that. So I went to his office to see if they would like take, hey, like there's this doctor who was in Gaza who can tell the truth about what he saw and what's actually happening and how 95% of his patients were children. Maybe, you might want to give him a platform on the congressional stage so that, that you say you're pro-Gaza, you say you're pro-Palestine, but what does that mean? So I did that. And then I also went to the Republican because Darrell Issa, Mark Perlmutter recently leaked texts between him and this Republican congressman who reached out to him privately saying, hey, I want you to talk to other Republican congressmen so you can tell them, because, Mark is, he has Jewish heritage. He's agnostic, but he has Jewish heritage. And, he's white from North Carolina. And sadly, that means something here in the United States. So he said, maybe we can have you come and talk to the other Republican lawmakers so that you can convince them about what's actually going on in Gaza. When I went in front of his office, though, he had like a "We Stand with Israel" sign. So I thought that was quite interesting. And his staff was really hostile to me. I was like explaining like, hey, this doctor who was in Gaza actively sending pictures to the congressman with dead children that he was operating on, he leaked these texts and now it's coming out that your congressman may not be as pro-Israel as you think he is. So maybe we should, figure out a solution here where you go full forward on this. You should have me talk with the congressman so that we can get Mark to actually, testify. And they were like, no one's available. Sorry. And then they just basically kicked me out of their office. So that was what I did just at the time before the hearing, because the hearing's at 2. I'm in the Congress like at 11 a.m. or so. And I'm saying all this to say, like, everybody here has the power to do that too. And it's not necessarily a matter of whether or not you think these congressmen are going to do something, but it's just, you should know, you can just walk into the Capitol and you can just run into congressmen. You can film yourself challenging them. You can film yourself going into their offices and saying, like, no matter what anyone says, I went to this congressman's office and I asked them to do this. And now you have evidence that they didn't listen to you. So I think that that's just something that people should know to do. Okay, anyway, so back to the Stone stuff. I just wanted to kind of get that out the way so people know.
No, that's perfectly fine, and I think people need. I think that's important for the context because, again, we have to hold these politicians accountable for all their BS. I mean, we're stuck in all these ridiculous, pointless wars, and I've have to say I've been very proud to not only have you on the show when we first met you on, but to be ongoing, continuous, calling out these politicians and being in their face and holding them accountable because we're not going to get that from people like AOC or.
Of course not.
They're not going to. So we have to do it.
That's right. That's exactly right. So, if anybody wants to, like, if you live in the DC area, or if you ever want to come down to DC with base sitting with the Oliver Stone delegation, so if you ever want to come down to DC, or if you ever want to do something in DC, it doesn't just have to be lobbying. I'm happy to do a sign protest. We do that stuff too. Just feel free to contact me. Our website is under maintenance right now, but it still has some functionality. VoteVega.nyc. Okay. All right. So moving on to the Stone hearing. So I got to the hearing, and there was a little reserve section that I got to sit in, and then that was basically how I got in. That was all. That's not much more to it. I although they didn't have it by name, it just said reserve. So I saw Oliver's name, and I was like, I'm gonna go sit right behind Oliver Stone. And so when the part that the TVs don't show is when they walk in. So like I just stood up and we just like chatted for a bit. And then when it was over, we also chatted some more, and I think people did see that on C-SPAN. You could just see me kind of talking to him afterwards. But yeah, that was it. That's basically it. Yeah. I just said, oh, he's going to be there. Okay, great. Let me go down there. That was it. And I went there. Because look, I ran for Congress. I do want to make laws someday. And so I want to be a part of these congressional hearings. I think that it's really important what these Kennedy files are showing us and some of the stuff that's being revealed and some of the stuff that's coming out. So it's my responsibility as somebody who wants to be a congressman to take an active interest in what's happening in the Congress.
Okay, we'll see. And again, I'm glad that we're able to see that. We're able to witness that now. And the thing is, I was just wondering, like, overall, like just the backstory, how it happened. But you did it of your own volition, and you did so on your own, which I have to say is again great work. But there were some moments during this hearing that, and I sat through listening to it. I even did a breakdown of it on yesterday's show. But all in all, the indifference of the committee hearing, unless maybe because you were there, it looked like everybody knew what was happening but they didn't really give a damn what was being presented before them by Oliver Stone or his colleagues, because the 80,000 pages that were released by the Trump administration, a lot of that's information we already knew. Now there's some new information, especially with Oswald speaking to Russia or Cuba, which okay, fine, but didn't the Soviets say, hey, USA, this guy, let's check him out a little bit? But then, of course, there really isn't that big smoking gun. And if anything, if the release of the Epstein files is anything, the JFK files, it's all one big distraction, one big nothing burger. And the big smoking gun is that there are documents that are missing. There's something there that's not adding up, especially with most notably how the round, or at least the rifle, the round, the position which Oswald was in, witnesses giving contradictory statements, information that's missing, paperwork that's missing, files that are missing, and also the infamous LBJ Warren Commission, not Elizabeth Warren, but Warren Commission, where you have the head of the CIA there as well. Overall, what are your thoughts of the committee hearing? Because I do want to play just a couple of videos, but overall, the action of the committee, was there anyone there that really stood out sincere, like, hey, what Oliver Stone is delivering to us is maybe we should look a little bit more into this, or was this just nothing but indifference?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because with a lot of these committee hearings, and it's not the first time I've seen this, but being there in person, you really see a whole different angle. Who's serious and who's an opportunist. So, for example, when it starts, you look at there's like all the committee members are there, right? And then after they get their 5 minutes, because the way these procedures work is the witnesses testify, and then the congressmen have 5 minutes to ask questions and whatnot. And then Anna Paulina Luna, who's the chair, gets to dictate like who goes next and stuff. And usually it's like one Republican, Democrat. When the people speak and then the camera's not on them anymore, they just leave the room. They just leave the room. So what it is and what happened, I mean, did you watch the whole thing in its entirety?
Yes, and I gotta say, it's been I knew that's one thing to watch it on video, but it's another thing to be in the front row seat to see it with your own eyes.
Oh, because it really pisses you off because like you have like Summer Lee and Crockett who are saying like, oh yeah, no, there's no smoking gun. The CIA didn't do this, and then they try to do gotchas. It's like, what do you know? You don't want to know the truth. You don't want to know what actually happened. You're already making this about Donald Trump. You're already trying to make this a partisan thing. It's like the one thing that you would like to think that both sides could agree on is, hey, maybe we should figure out who did kill the president. And they're already politicizing this. And then they leave. They just leave afterwards. Like when that one congressman brought out like those giant slides and was like, did you tweet this out 10 years ago? Or
like no one cares about a tweet. What everyone cares about, what happened to JFK, who shot him, what happened. Anyway,
yes, that's why I really appreciated one of the witnesses. I think his name was Jeff, who said like, I didn't come here for partisan squabble. I came here for the truth. You know, he's like, I am a liberal Democrat, but but this task force was signed by this president. You know, so I think that there were definitely some good, like for example, Nancy Mace Scott, she's like this raging Zionist. I hate her so much, you know, like she's just she was in Israel when a bomb went off on a bus, even though no one died or was injured, you know, that Hamas supposedly planted in Israel. It's like, oh yeah, sure, like the one act of terrorism that's happened while congressmen are in Israel. And she's like, this is why we need to support our allies, blah 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 blah. But you know, it seemed like the Republicans were feigning as if there was some general interest, but ultimately the real meat of it was what the witnesses had. You know, the fact that James Angleton had a 190-page binder of Lee Harvey Oswald on the day of the assassination. And then when he's later asked to testify about it, he said, no, we only had like minimal stuff on Oswald. 190 pages isn't minimal. You know, I mean, that stuff was just great, you know. And then like all of them were, except for that one witness who was brought by the Democratic Party to like be like, yeah, I mean, maybe we should, you know, slow down the redaction stuff because of Social Security numbers or whatever, you know. But anyway, those are just some of my general impressions on what I experienced.
Speaking of general impressions, I'm gonna play this video here because the version of the video we played, you're right behind Oliver Stone, and there's a point where he's just like this, like, and has to deal with everybody's favorite Representative Crockett, because there's a point where even you look at the camera, like, I don't know if you knew it or not, but like the way you turned your head, it was like that infamous meme. Yeah, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here, because
I had a few moments like that, but
yeah, it's like, so here's Crockett politicizing the JFK files and bringing in Trump.
Government accountability and transparency, like most of my colleagues. Nearly all the previously classified JFK assassination files are now public and show no evidence of a CIA conspiracy. What I find funny about this hearing is that the Republicans are here relitigating whether CIA agents lied 60 years ago, but aren't doing anything about the CIA director lying to Congress just 6 days ago.
Oh my God.
We should be having a hearing on the fact that the unqualified Secretary of Defense and other senior Trump officials were carelessly discussing classified military plans over an unsecure Signal group chat. And instead of providing oversight over the administration's handling of classified information, the Republicans have spent a week trying to convince the American people that the military plans were not classified. So instead of giving a platform to conspiracy theories, and let me be clear, there are holes. I don't want y'all to think that I don't think that there are holes. Nah. But when we're looking back, we need to look back so that we can look forward and hopefully do better. So that is why I am bringing us to present day.
Okay, well, I think, first of all, if there are holes, let's go ahead and figure it out. But my audience, you know, as somebody has asked, either did she do that herself, or is that a script that was written for her, or somebody told her to write that? Because what the hell does Trump have to do? And the Signalgate situation, which is a whole other different animal altogether, was JFK. I mean, we want to know, because I can make this argument here, or and maybe I can get some pushback, but perception drives reality. JFK can be viewed as our last lion, our president, who was a leader. Ever since then, everyone else has been following a script, reading from a script, and obeying orders because, heaven forbid, they might end up like JFK. I mean, it is important for us to know what happened, because why all the secrecy after so many decades? Your thoughts, especially when you heard that. Did your brain melt out of your ears?
Oh, well, absolutely. And it's funny. I know she's a clueless congresswoman because after she finished speaking, she stayed. Like, she was one of the last people who stayed at the and that's not standard. Like I said, all the congressmen, after they gave their 5-minute statements, just walked away and left. One of her staff or somebody came up to her. I was watching this as somebody else was testifying, and tapped her on the shoulder, whispered something, and she was like, "Oh, okay." And then she grabbed her coat and then just left, as if somebody was telling her, "Ma'am, you're not supposed to be here anymore. You have to leave." She was like, "Oh, okay," because like that's yeah, no, seriously, like she didn't get the memo or something. Like, you're supposed to leave now, and she's like, "Oh, okay." But see, the problem with her statement is that, like, there is a way in which you can call out, like, for example, we've had Russiagate, we've had the intelligence failures of Iran and Iraq, what got us into the war in Iraq, what got us into Afghanistan, what got us into trying to destabilize Syria. And but you don't have to diminish what's happening with the Kennedy files. In fact, the Kennedy files can reveal to you the rogue, corrupt elements in the intelligence community that continue. Like, you could say, I wonder if we will find connections in the Kennedy files that persist today that have led to numerous intelligence failures for ulterior motives that have gotten us into wars. You can say these things and still be like, so that's why I'm incredibly happy that we have these witnesses here today, because if we find out the truth of what happened to President Kennedy and also to RFK Jr. and Martin Luther King Jr., we may expose the real corruption in the intelligence community that has also led to 50 years of failure and sabotage. And it'll allow us to really root out what's actually causing the United States' collapse. There's a way to do that. But you know what the problem is? They're all stupid. They're all stupid and partisan. And Crockett, who speaks at like an elementary schoolgirl level, who is just being told what to say, she doesn't know. She doesn't care. She actually doesn't care what's in those files. She was just told, she was given a script, and she was told, this is something that Donald Trump is doing, and we have to be against it because Donald Trump is saying that, this is important, and we don't like Trump, and anything he says is toxic, right?
Right.
So that's her thing. It was not just her; it was her and Summer Lee too. But don't get, and also I don't want to sound like I'm playing favorites, because like Boebert got something wrong too on the Republican side too.
Way ahead of you. We actually got that video here. So hold on, let's go ahead and pull this up, because I understood what Boebert was saying. I get it. But still, like, again, the internet. Anytime someone makes a mistake like this, you got to laugh at them.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Hopefully we can stay on topic for the rest of this hearing. We seem to be wrapping up pretty close here. Mr. Stone, you wrote a book accusing LBJ of being involved in the killing of President Kennedy. Did these most recent releases confirm or negate your initial charge? Being involved in the assassination.
Yeah,
Hold on, dude, microphone. There you go.
No, I didn't. If you
Yes,
look
sir.
closely at the film, there's no. It accuses the President Johnson
Okay.
of being part of a complicit in a cover-up of the case, but not in the assassination itself, which I don't know.
What do you think that he was complicit with? Yes, sir. I'll get to you.
The cover-up. Well, how about, for starters, appointing Alan Dulles, the head of the CIA, who was fired by Kennedy, to the commission itself, the Warren Commission, and he goes to almost every meeting, and he's pretty much in charge of the Warren Commission from the beginning. Alan Dulles. That's part of the evidence that points to President Johnson's either incompetence or involvement.
Mr. Morley, I think you had something to add on that.
I think you're confusing Mr. Oliver Stone with Mr. Roger Stone.
Yes.
All
Yeah, I
right,
think
all right. Yeah,
what
go ahead, go
what
ahead.
you don't hear is the gallery or where we were sitting all scream out, "That's Roger Stone. That's not Oliver. That's Roger Stone." But you don't hear that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating that didn't get caught on the microphones or either that Congress that these are the representatives didn't call for orders. How loud was the audience? Was it
I
just
mean,
like
it wasn't like that's Roger Stone. It was like first like little murmurs like that's Roger Stone, that's Roger Stone, and then you just hear like a collective that's Roger Stone, and then that's when
oh, okay, okay,
that
okay.
that's when like Lauren like Bobert like realized, oh shit, I messed up, and then that's why she cuts off Jeff, who's like, yeah, I misspoke, I misstated, you know.
Yeah, my bad. Well, listen. At least she was able to recognize her mistake. So let me ask you just in your own personal opinion, Bobert or Crockett, which one had the dumber statement? Because at least with Bobert, I will say this.
Is this like a F Mary kill thing or
Yeah, I don't know. I think so. Yeah, which one made the dumber statement, Bobert or Crockett? Or was there somebody else that stood out besides those two? Because those two got the most attention.
No, I think those two really like showed how stupid both parties are.
Okay.
You know, Bobert. Well, of course, no. There was also the other congressman whose name escapes me at the moment. The one who was sitting next to Garcia, who brought those slides. Like he was.
Oh,
Really,
Summer Lee or
no,
the
not
other
Summer Lee.
Oh.
There was another Democrat. God, I don't remember his name. He's the one who brought out like the slides with the tweets and stuff. Like, here's what you tweeted 10 years ago.
Right.
Because he tried to do something stupid where he tried to like make Oliver Stone's history in Vietnam. Like he tried to
Oh, I
say
know what
that,
you're talking about. Yeah.
right, but he couldn't succeed because Oliver didn't really hear him, or maybe Oliver was playing dumb to run out the clock, which that could also have been a tactic too. There's little clocks underneath where they speak that tell you how much time is left for you to interact with the congressman. And when that guy started to like, you were in Vietnam, but you got the Bronze Heart in 68, but you weren't in service till 69. And Oliver's like, what? Are you talking about friendly fire? And then, Jeff Morley is like trying to explain to Oliver what's going on. And then the time runs out. Then the chairwoman's like, okay, that's enough. Stop, And then that congressman walks away embarrassed. Like, what was that about? Like what? So what they did, and what's disgusting about the whole hearing as a whole is that like it's weaponized, like it's active warfare against the Trump administration is how it was being used by the Democrats. They are trying to politicize everything that Trump does. It's like, look, on this one thing where he is saying that we should, have more transparency, you're going to try to politicize that. It only makes you look bad. It only makes you look incompetent, So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that again, I have to say it just shows overall just how a lot of these politicians aren't even taking any real accountability. And here's where Representative Garcia, which I found to be interesting, it was only 48 seconds, but this one right here, how he was asking this question. Let's go and pull this up here.
Mr. Morley, I know you didn't say this explicitly in your testimony. Clarify. I think it's good for the record. Now, we know that your research, of course, is very focused on what the U.S. government knew about Lee Harvey Oswald. I think you made that also very clear. You believe Lee Harvey Oswald fired the shots who killed President Kennedy. Is that correct, sir?
He was not solely responsible for the president.
The microphone.
No, I don't believe that President Lee Harvey Oswald shot President Kennedy. I don't think the evidence supports that.
You don't think the evidence supports that he fired the shots?
He might have fired a gun. He was not the intellectual author of the president's death.
Okay, and I wanted to clarify because I think the firing of the shots. Just wanted to clarify that you do believe that he fired the shots.
No, I don't.
Okay,
that has not been determined by the evidence.
Okay. Well, I want to just get you to
because again they start speaking about the round and the weapon, and I think that really is fascinating because as myself, I've served in the Marine Corps, and there are various different types of firearms, and every round is different, and every weapon is different. But as it stands, especially with the evidence that was being presented, especially in the aftermath of the horrific aftermath of what happened to JFK. When you have the investigators saying that they have the round, that they had the bullet, that they had the evidence and trajectory where it was shooting from, things weren't adding up because, you have to remember that there's wind velocity and the power behind a round and the damage that it can do. Because once a round is fired, it does leave, and I hate saying this, an impact, and it shows like, what kind of round did what to a person or what it did to said target. And things weren't adding up. And I just want to get your thoughts on it, because I thought that was a huge red flag that no one in that not Senate hearing, but in that hearing altogether, in that congressional hearing, no one was really understanding what was being presented before them.
That's right. You're completely right, and I think that first of all, I was happy to hear that it's not the last hearing, that there's going to be more hearings. It is just to
Great.
sort of start. Then I think if there was anything positive that came out of it, I mean, a lot of positive things came out of it. One of them is that people are looking more into Morley. I think Oliver Stone's presence there only helps aid the sort of more important, like the DiEugenios or the Morleys, who actually do the hard work, right? And I think Oliver would agree with me that, like, he had DiEugenio be one of his lead researchers, and he also had Morley there. So now people are looking more into it. People are wanting to investigate this more. So quite frankly, even though the congressman in front of them didn't actually understand what was going on or what was being presented, and of course Garcia, who is the Democrat for that, the reason he's saying that, the reason he's saying, well, but Oswald did fire shots, right? He's trying to paint the Kennedy killing as like, this is just another Republican. Excuse me. This is just another Republican conspiracy theory. This is all their conspiracy theories. We know who killed Oswald Kennedy. It was Oswald. He fired the shots. The narrative is exactly how the Warren Commission. That's what that is for. It's to feed a certain audience of people who just want to paint the whole thing as like one giant conspiracy theory cooked up by Trump to say there's some deep state, whatever. That's what Garcia's role is. And we saw that more explicitly with Summerlee and Crockett and the one before Summerlee.
Great. So again, that is why we need to have this conversation. So going forward, though, because again, I think a lot of us want to hear more from Oliver Stone, and especially in regards towards his coverage and work on the JFK files. I feel like we're being lied to. I personally feel that so much evidence is being hidden, and with the way the JFK files, and in turn, even though they're completely different, the Jeffrey Epstein files have been released, it's like, okay, here's your distraction, but the smoking gun has been shredded or locked up somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, never to be seen again by human eyes. And we're still waiting on the MLK files, and as well as the RFK senior files, because what is always interesting to me, and I think we're the only channel that talked about it, but before he made his run for the presidency, RFK Jr. had an interview with Mike Tyson on his channel. And while that interview can be seen on Mike Tyson's podcast platforms, the YouTube version of that video was Thanos out of existence. And they were talking about RFK Jr.'s father, RFK Sr., and what happened and the potential cover up that was there. We lost 3 individuals who I think maybe could have made this world a little bit better. Maybe if they were around, and perhaps that's me being idealistic, because we have to remember MLK, JFK, RFK Sr. had a lot of skeletons in their closet. They weren't infallible. All right.
Oh, well,
But
look, and they didn't need to be. I mean, that's, this whole thing about looking for perfect people to lead us, you're not going to find it, because none of us are perfect. We all have something that we hide from people. And it wasn't necessarily the bad things that they did. It was the intention that they had. Like with JFK, I recognize that as far as, before 1962, the guy was like a rabid anti-communist, like the reason we're going to the moon is to beat the Russians. But there was a transformation that happened in President Kennedy, which is what ultimately killed him, which was, he said, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, and he changed and said, maybe we do need to work with the Russians. So he gives that American University speech. He then goes to the floor of the UN, talking directly with the Soviets, saying, like, the endeavor of space does not have to be limited to one country. No one flag will be on the moon. And he was asking the Soviets to join him in joint space exploration to the moon. That, how would that have changed the Cold War dynamic and mentality of the world in that time period if instead of it just being Buzz Aldrin and Armstrong going up there, it would have been Russians and Americans going up to the moon together. It would have
Yeah.
completely changed the dynamics. And, Martin Luther King Jr., I'm sure, of course, we've all heard the stories. He wasn't a perfect person either. But we don't remember these people for their flaws or their mistakes. We remember them for their contribution to the human spirit,
Right.
and that's ultimately what they will be remembered for. And I'll make one more point. MLK Jr. was never elected to office. He didn't run for anything. He was not a president. He wasn't a congressman. He wasn't even a city councilman. He was just somebody who believed that you can actually advance the cause of civil rights through nonviolent creative action. And people should also remember that at the time of his death, he was really unpopular. 75% of the country thought that he was wrong in his attempts to try and achieve peace. And it was only after he died that people were like, oh my God, what a tragedy. He was the better, angel of our nature. And so I would just say that even though you think they could have made, if they were still around, they could have made the world a better place. In a way, they still are, because we still talk about them, and it's the ideas that they left behind that we still use today that is more alive than even they were at the time that they were breathing. And it's our job to make sure that they continue to live through these ideas.
I think that's one hell of a note to end it on, Jose, and I think that's a fantastic note to end it on. And thank you for that, because I think I think that maybe flies over a lot of people's heads. And you know what? I agree that, yeah, we have to remember their legacy, not for who they are. And let's face it, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect.
I'm
But if
almost
we could,
perfect. But
but ha 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 ha. Yeah, right, buddy. Yeah, right. But I think it's just if we really take a stop and realize that, okay, they push forward, but we have to continue on the legacy. We have to continue on the fight, and that's why we have to build that better future. And will you be going to the second hearing? I know you got your campaign going on, and you got updating your website. Can you enlighten us what's happening right there? What's that? Because you're entering into the gauntlet again, running for Congress. So let us know what's going on, my friend, with your campaign.
we're doing an ultimate transformation right now. And I mean, I was working on a script right now. So Richie Torres is going to run for governor, and the Republicans are going to do an all-out offensive to try and take the Bronx. They're going to try to run some serious Republican candidate. And I was pretty disgusted because I think it was like last night or the night before, Randy Fine, this guy who Trump endorsed for this Florida special election, just won the race. And he was just saying that the people of Palestine are animals and that the blood of Gaza should run. And so one thing I want to make very clear with my campaign is that when I say we're an independent movement, I really mean it. And if you're a Republican who wants to bring your Israeli first agenda here, you need to leave and get out, because we will reject you right now. And the Bronx does not stand for genocide, and the Bronx will not accept an Israeli first person. But I know a lot of people would then say, well, wait a minute, but isn't Richie Torres, the current congressman, an Israeli puppet? And the answer is yes. Why didn't the Democrats primary him in the last election cycle? Did no one realize what terrible person Richie Torres was? No, of course they knew how terrible he was. See, the thing is, the MO wasn't sent out to replace him, because the Democratic Party, the future of the Democratic Party, is 435 Richie Torreses. That's the future of the Democratic Party. And so when he goes to run for governor, and let's say he gives up his congressional seat, which is likely, they're going to put up some Democrat Party approved Richie Torres clone who is going to be pro-Israeli, but they might be waving a Palestinian flag to convince you we're different. We're the Democratic Party T flag. We're totally on your side. We don't support Netanyahu and genocide. And then you're going to be right back where you were, because the Democratic Party is the party of genocide, just like the party of the Republicans. It's all one big party, and it's all a party of genocide. And if you actually want to fight oligarchy, like what so-called AOC and Bernie Sanders are doing, you have to stop supporting AOC and Bernie Sanders, because they only call out oligarchy and corruption when it doesn't happen in their party, right? When they lose the House, the Senate, and the presidency, only then we have to call out the rotten, corrupt, elements of our government, but not in their own party. They don't want to upset their own party, even though AOC was ready to endorse Biden for another 4 years and fall on the cross for him if she needed to. No. See, so my campaign is a rejection, a real rejection of establishment politics. I know people who supported my campaign, who voted for Donald Trump, who were actually America first, who are extremely disappointed with the deportations, who are extremely disappointed with being Israeli first. So you know what? We are building an independent movement here in the Bronx, which is a rejection of the two-party system and an embrace of a new era of independent politics. And it really does begin here in the Bronx. And so if anybody wants to be involved, vote Vega.nyc. We have things going on, whether it's trying to save the school here from being shut down, All Hallows, to making sure that people like Mark Perlmutter have a platform to speak, which I have to talk to you about, by the way, because I definitely want to bring him on.
Yes, I'd like to have
Hardman's-
him on the show. Yes, absolutely. I want to see if we can get that scheduled very soon. So see, I told you folks we're getting awesome guests on the show.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And you know, just like we have a year and a half, and I want to fundamentally change how the entire country thinks about politics in that year and a half before I even get to November of 2026. And I'm only going to be able to do that with your help. It's not something I can do alone. I need people. We need the money. We need your time. We need your support in whatever way you can give it. Just please help us out. Vote Vega.nyc.
And just real quick here, folks, because Jose Vega is one of those dauntless few. This is where you can follow him on X. Obviously, you said your campaign website is right now going under construction. But I got to say, it's been a wonderful journey having you with us on our show. And the first moment when you confronted AOC all the way up until now, it's been one hell of a journey. And I wish you all the best. And since I support independents and third parties, look, I'm glad that you're running as an independent. And I hope that your campaign is going to be effective enough to knock out both the Democrats and Republicans, especially in a state like New York. But you got it going on. And I just want to say, just keep pushing forward and never back down. So are there any kind of events? What's up?
You've supported me like from the very beginning, and I'm not perfect. I've made lots of mistakes. I've said lots of things, you know, and to be quite honest, I'm glad I ran through the gauntlet in 2024, because what that made me realize, I mean, I fell into like a deep depression after the election, and it wasn't even because I lost. I mean, in one sense, I knew I wasn't going to win. It's a behemoth, right? I realized I wasn't mature enough and I wasn't at the place to really understand what it means to represent somebody as like somebody who wants to run for Congress. And I'm not saying I completely understand it now, but there's a recognition of the immense responsibility it takes to put yourself out there and say, you need to help me get into the Congress. And this sort of journey, it's like I'm still learning. And I hope to always continue learning. And I know if I've got people like you supporting me by my side, I genuinely believe we can see a real renaissance in this country of people who want real independence again. So thank you.
Are there any campaign events that are happening right now before we let you go?
Yeah, people should follow my X. We're planning a fundraiser for mid-April, and we're just trying to lock down a venue right now. So just please follow my X and you'll be able to find out about that. And every weekend, actually, we do have meetings in my office. You only see one part of my office. There's a whole other part over there that I don't show. But every Friday and Saturday, we have campaign meetings here in the Bronx. So if you want to get on the ground floor and infiltrate us and find out what we're doing, just contact us, whether that's X, Instagram, or my website. I'm very easy to reach. And we can get you going.
All right. That sounds like a great deal, and glad to have you on, Jose Vega. Hopefully you get to join up with the second Oliver Stone hearing if and when that does happen. So we're hoping that happens soon, and keep on doing the great work, buddy. And I'll send you up out of here, but keep speaking truth to power and never stop.
Thank you, Kit.
All right. All the best to you, my friend.
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Whether or not in Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
I don't mean to sound alarmist, but most of what they let you read is garbage. Most of it's designed to warp our minds until subconsciously you find you'll take the time to lick their boots free of grime and wipe their minds free of tarnish. Oil is the centerpiece, a body count of millions is the garnish. So how's it feel to know we funded every carcass? That every year our taxes pay for carpet bombing Gaza under shroud of darkness? Or that we spend enough a year to house and feed each homeless person in the streets on turning families in apartment buildings in the Middle East to bloody craters full of charred garments? And our media is silent at best. At worst, they can find it in themselves to call war crimes clashes and label children burned to ashes terrorists who played a stupid game and reaped the harvest. And every time we try to paint the truth, the news sends their slugs to suck off all the varnish and distort it into something harmless. See, the media will hang you by your feet and keep you half asleep. So yes, I'm here to set you free, but freedom won't be sweet because you'll fall 1,000 feet when I come cut you out your harness. They say those who dream the deepest fall the farthest. They also say that home is where the heart is. But if home for you is Gaza, Netanyahu's got you painted as a target. Perhaps it's not the impact, but it's what you see when falling that will hit the hardest. Maybe it's the sound of all those children crying out in those apartments that will hit the hardest. Maybe all those little bodies scattered in the dirt will hit the hardest. Maybe seeing human lives assigned such little worth will hit the hardest. Maybe it's the knowledge that you're paying for the darkest of atrocities committed on this earth that will hit the hardest. Maybe it's the knowledge that we give 10 million a day to oppressors who possess the kind of Medicare you'll die in debt before you see that's gonna hit the hardest. Maybe then you'll see you've always had more in common with the commoners whose slaughter we fund every day in Gaza than our senators and bosses. Maybe then you'll see our country never had a conscience. Maybe then the retroactive guilt will make you nauseous. Maybe what hits harder than the impact is the act of being conscious, of knowing your complicity and helplessness to try and stop the bloody deeds of Congress. And that no matter who's in office, America preserves its foreign interests by whatever means its greed demands, however monstrous. You see, we'll always need a place to train our contras. And Biden's got a backup plan should harm befall the Holy Land. Wipe it off the map, he'll draw it back on with an iron hand. He demands an Israel or reasonable effigy to exercise democracy and colonize the Middle East. Regardless of the human cost of phosphorus atrocities, bought and paid with money they rerouted out the budget for the non-essential things like ever making Flint's water clean. So maybe what hits hardest is the day you see this country for its actual priorities, and nevermore no honest peace attempting sleep. Maybe then you'll look at politicians making speeches like a blood-encrusted beast espousing destiny to empty seats and fellow leeches. As the gauntlet of democracy extends its brutal reach, like a giant wave of trash come to crash on foreign beaches. Maybe build a base, throw a flag down and heavily pollute the region. Rape your ecosystems, gut your fauna and congratulate you on your new allegiance. Oops, we mean alliance. This is something mutual unless you're non-compliant. We stole something crucial on which you can be reliant. So maybe what hits hardest is the centrists saying both sides need to stop the violence. And those would be the very same centrists saying we should all accept police brutality, who hem and haw and clutch their fucking pearls and spend their time condemning riots. But very soon will come the day the centrists all get censored like the rest of us, and pious as they'll try to be, they won't stay quiet. But they'll just end up shouting in the void that they were also quick to render us subscribers. And it will be too late to light the fires. So far away tonight, there burn the spires of a region set ablaze for which you've paid for every pyre. Which is why your checks weren't all $600 higher. And call it foreign interests or American desires. This is why your checks weren't all $600 higher. Far away tonight, there burn the spires of a region set ablaze for which you've paid for every pyre. Foreign interests or American desires. This is why your checks weren't all $600